So now we'll move to talking about the psalm for the Feast of the Transfiguration of our Lord, February 15th, 2026. We're on Psalm 2 this week, and it says just verses 6 through 12, which is fine. If you look at verse 7, you will quickly understand why this psalm is used for this particular Sunday and the church year. He, that means the Lord, said to me, and since the me is capitalized, that means to Christ, "Thou art my son, today I have begotten thee." This shows up in our gospel reading, the Matthew 17, and like I pointed out, it also showed up at Jesus' baptism, which we read about back in January in Matthew chapter 3. So this psalm God gave to David as a prophecy. 1,000 years before Jesus was born, King David was writing and singing these words about Jesus. And so it's really important then for Matthew, in writing his gospel, to connect what he's writing back to a lot of the writings of the Old Testament to show that Jesus is the Christ. And again, we're at the end of the season of Epiphany, where Jesus has been proven through our readings, through his actions, to have come from God and to be equal to God. He is part of who God is, part of the Trinity. Verse 8 continues, "Ask of me, and I will give you the nations as your inheritance. You shall break them with the rod of iron. You shall shatter them like earthenware." This is also a prophecy. God is going to give Jesus the authority over all the nations of the earth. And what is he going to do? He's going to take care of the problems. So this is a promise that in some ways gets fulfilled. It was fulfilled in David's time. God defeated a number of David's enemies and foreign nations who were coming in to invade Israel. God has done this since David, in between David and now, defeating his own enemies and the enemies of God's people. God still does this today. We see quite a bit of evidence of that right now. Kingdoms toppling, oppressors being broken and shattered. God is still doing this today. And God is also going to continue doing this until the final day when God wipes out all of the evil. And everything will be given to Jesus as his inheritance. So what are we supposed to do with that? Verse 10, "Show discernment and take warning." Why? Why do we need to take warning? What about? Well, worship the Lord with reverence. And this was kind of the lesson of Exodus 24. Coming before God in his holiness is special. We don't just strut on up. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to remember who God is, what he's done, and what that means for us, instead of just acting like, oh, it's no big deal. And we forget sometimes. This is why at our church, we reverence before we kneel at the rail. We reverence before we step into the altar area. We begin our worship with confession. It's a big deal to come and worship the Lord. Yes, he lives in our hearts and is present to us anytime that we need, but that doesn't mean that we can go to him as though it's no big deal. It needs to continue to be a big deal, and we need to do it in a certain way. And he says with reverence, and he means with reverence. Rejoice with trembling. There's an attitude that we need to have toward God, and it's a recognition that he's God and we aren't, and that means something for how we come to him. Do homage to the Son, and Son is capitalized. So again, this is about Jesus. David is talking about Jesus, even though David lived 1,000 years before Christ. Do homage to the Son, lest he become angry and you perish in the way. How we act and how we respond to who God is and to what he has done matters. and it matters to him. And we see this over and over. If we refuse and if we keep our hearts hard and we don't show reverence or discernment or heed his warning, he can wipe us out, and he has done things like that to people, but it can also go very badly with us. And the way to avoid that is just to acknowledge who he is, and then to be reverent and to rejoice. How can we rejoice? It doesn't matter what we're going through. There's always going to be hard stuff. There's always going to be terror and things that we don't want, and yet we are still to rejoice. Why? Because of who he is and because of what he's done and because of what he calls us to. Then these three things that I keep repeating over and over: our circumstances and how we feel do not in any way get in the way of our ability to rejoice. And that's why he keeps telling us that you've got to rejoice. Joy is a choice that we make as we approach him. It doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in our lives. And then this end of verse 12, how blessed are all who take refuge in him. When I put my boy to bed at night, I make the sign of the cross on his forehead, and I say, God gives the angels charge over you to guard you in all your ways, which is another psalm, and it's what Jesus quoted. And then this end of verse 12, blessed are all who take refuge in him. And that's true, and I want my kid to have that in his heart. It doesn't mean everything is perfect for those who take refuge in him. It means you're blessed. It doesn't mean that you're never going to struggle, that you're never going to hurt, but it means that there is refuge. What is refuge? It's protection, it's comfort, it's courage, it's all of the things that we found in the Matthew 17. Jesus came to them and touched them and said, arise, do not be afraid. That's refuge. He was their refuge on the Mount of Transfiguration. He was the refuge for Moses and the people when Moses received the law and the words that God wanted them to understand. He is still our refuge today. And so that's why every single night at bedtime, I've been doing this every night of his life. God gives the angels charge over you to guard you in all of your ways. Blessed are they all who find refuge in him. So this is a really special psalm for me, and I hope that it will be for you too as you're preparing the readings ahead of Transfiguration.